Hello, good morning, everyone. This is a small talk podcast coming in with, I believe, this is our eighth episode. And today we have a very interesting topic encompassing a multitude of other guests that I'm going to be bringing in as well. But they'll be coming in with different perspectives of from product as well as from design. And myself, of course, coming in from the engineering POV. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation today in regards to how to build that winning formula of a product development team, or at least how to get yourself working in a good group, or squad, as some of us might be familiar with the Spotify squadification model. But yeah, before we start, just to do a little bit of self-advertisement, of course, for this group, we're part of Big O Development. In the past, we did like some meetup events as well, and hopefully in the future, we'll be doing some of that. Yeah, but do subscribe to our LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube if you like our content so far. But yeah, without further ado, let me bring in my fellow guests who are also going to be sharing with us their opinions, as well as like the what their value opinions, as well as the pointers towards building that good product development team. Yep. So our topic today, as seen over here, and the my guest is going to be two of them. One of them, Stephanie. She's currently a product lead at Endowus, and Shirley. She used to be at PayPal as a senior UX designer. So yeah, definitely their opinions over here would be quite valued in terms of understanding how can we get to that stage of a good product development team. So let me bring them in from the backstage. Good morning, Shir. Good morning, Stephanie.
Hello, hello. Hi guys.
Morning. How you guys doing?
Good.
We actually already had a little bit of a chat before this entire live stream, of course, started. But yeah, maybe let's just jump to the questions directly, and then let's see, where we can get from there. So, just to set in a bit of context for folks who don't have who may not be familiar with the context of a product development team, especially let's say in the case of any software firms, right? Like essentially in any software companies, let's say, if you're building, let's say, an online product, like for example, in a company called Ascenda, we have a platform as a service tool where fintech companies use, oh sorry, not fintech companies, we are a fintech company. Other companies like banks use our tools to be able to put in their own loyalty program system. Okay, so for us, usually we have like sort of this product development squad where you have software developers, product managers, as well as designers inside this mix. Okay, there's of course things that are deliberately left out of here because of course we don't have like guests representing them today. But there's also other areas like data lah. But that's it. So I want to use that and to drive that discussion today of how do we, or what's the key of creating a good setup for that product development team. Yeah, maybe I'll start first. So I think since I've noted down some pointers and also shared with the other guests as well. Of course, I also want to hear from their opinion. Like how far my points are true and what other points they have as well. For myself, I feel like this in terms of what's key to a good product development team, I think one of the key points that I usually like to say, maybe it goes even beyond product development team, but more as a person. I feel like trust is that big thing, and I like to say that there's always that formula to trust, which is trust is equivalent to integrity plus competency. Uh, so just one quick small example what I mean by that. If let's say you have a kid, you have a baby, and you need to, let's say you are not able to take care of your baby for, let's say, a single day, you need to ask your friends to help you to do it. So would you choose someone who has a lot of integrity, very honest person, but doesn't know how to take care of babies, have no experience in that? Or would you ask someone who has a lot of experience being a babysitter, but has very little integrity? I think for most people, the answer is kind of like, maybe in both areas, but actually, I don't really want them as well. But you want someone in the center of those two things, which is someone with some integrity, someone who has the competency doing that as well. So I think that's what builds into that formula of trust. Lah. Trust equals integrity plus competency. And for me, yeah, I feel that trust itself, right, builds in between of tech, which is engineering, product, and design. Because in terms of, let's say, like for design first, you need product and tech to design, to trust that design is able to come up with the most feasible user experience, trust that they are able to do their jobs well. And then tech, of course, will go into the sense of being able to execute it. And again, product and design would be trusting that the engineering team would give the right t-shirt sizing, the good estimates, so that we can complete things on time. And then product, of course, being able to set the base of this entire project itself, being able to, let's say, go back to, let's say, the executives and answer in terms of, like, when this projects will be done. So that's my take. At least as a base keystone, trust, I think, is a really important thing. But I've blabbered on way too much, and this is the point where I will sabo my guests to tell me what they think as well. So what's your take on this? What's key besides trust, or on add things on top of trust?
Yeah, sure. I can jump in here. So I definitely agree with trust lah. I think besides trust, there's also like alignment. I guess from a PM perspective, that's very important. Like number one thing people always ask for, making sure you have alignment with your team. Alignment being like I guess two factors I could think of. Like one is being aligned on the outcomes that you want to solve for. Of course, knowing what problems you're trying to solve, but also like the end user itself, what sort of experience, what sort of value do you want to give to the end user? So I think alignment is pretty big for me, just because in a in a startup things can change so fast. I think it's just critical to have alignment. I think the second thing besides alignment would be definitely relationships. I think to your point, right, you mentioned about as a person you want to build trust and all that. So I think like just building that good solid base of relationships with your team, engineers, designers, data analysts. I think that helps a lot because then, whatever issues, whatever challenges you face, you know that you have this team that you can count on and support and get support from, essentially. Yeah, yeah. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Yeah, I think in fact, I would say both of those points of alignment and trust actually also kind of bleeds in together. And maybe I'll just coming from a very, I'll say naive lah standpoint as an engineer that coming, now of course I'm more of a senior person in my workplace now, but even as a junior person in the past, right, I think that trust in much more senior product managers who would be able to bring in that alignment that you're talking about, at least that person that can give me that motivation that I'm working on something really great. The users, there's something that this final objectives, right, not just talking about OKRs, but rather like the thing that we're building, it makes sense because there's some end user that will use it later on, and there's some value that's driven out of them, and of course there's some benefits that goes to the company we're working for as well. Yeah. Sure. What do you think?
Sorry, I was yawning. Um, I think definitely trust and alignment are some of the important things that is key to a product development team. Um, from my perspective, coming from someone who I would call myself a facilitator, and my job in this trifecta is to actually facilitate these kind of conversations. So I would say transparency and communication would be what leads to trust and alignment. Um, I think in a company like PayPal, where you are kind of I'm working in a global compliance team. So global compliance team, it's its own product team, but it also serves the other branches of the company. It would serve the consumer team, it would serve the merchant team, it would serve other verticals. So it's like a your own product development team plus you're also a consultant. So that communication and facilitation scale is very necessary in such an environment. Um, yeah, I felt like I just did a lot of that in PayPal. And the thing about trust is pretty interesting because I feel like the minute I went into PayPal, um, there is an immediate feeling of you are assured that everyone else is doing the best job. There's no blame game going on. But what I have felt in my 2.5 years there is that, if we are in a team, if you're in a big project, everybody just assume that, okay, you know your stuff. Um, and I don't know, it's just like, is it because of the culture that is built? Did they do it via the interviews? How are they managing to kind of get all of these people in that have the same mindset? That is pretty interesting to me. Like the trust seems to be built in, interestingly. That's really interesting to me. Yeah. Yeah, that's all I have on this topic for now.
Hmm. Well, actually, that's quite interesting. I think the trust being baked in as part of culture. I know you alluded towards that. It's a bit of a mysterious concept. Like everybody who joins in just blends in automatically there. Any things that you might have seen in your company that might push towards why people implicitly they have that trust even without knowing like this person. Let's say you hire a new person, he hasn't been there for like 2-3 weeks. Like how would you have that trust in that, or is it like more giving them that what's that benefit of the doubt first before judging?
I think for new people, of course, I can't speak on the experience of other people who are in PayPal,
Mm.
but for me, I felt like anyone who's new, they would just kind of sit back and they're probably like sitting back for a month because they want to observe what's happening in these kind of conversations. And then there's a buddy that's always paired with them, obviously. Like in most companies, there's buddies that's paired with a new person. And then the buddy would explain, oh, this is culturally, it's like this. You may want to say this, you may not want to say those kind of things. And then, I don't know, I find it very hard to explain because, like I said, in my experience, people are just really, really nice. You 99% of the time, you don't hear the screaming or you are not like, oh, you're to blame and things like that. Yeah. I
Is,
don't
is
know how
that
about
the
you.
1% of the time? The
One
1%
percent,
where it's like
yes, it's a
someone
story.
screams it obvious.
But that 1%, I could explain it as well in retrospect. So
Mm,
yeah. If you ask me, I might tell you later on.
okay. Maybe later on.
Maybe.
But jumping in. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe to touch on also the one word that I think both Stephanie as well as sure you guys mentioned too, which is alignment. So I know there's some word, I think things that Sure mentioned, things about transparency, communication. But how do you guys go around building alignments between within your team as well as inter teams?
Yeah, I guess for myself, it's really quite basic things like one-to-ones, right? Like I have bi-weekly one-to-ones with my engineering manager, the EM, I also try to have one-to-ones with at least every one of my like the engineers in my team. So I work in a squadified model as well. So I try to get at least a coffee chat with them, every single member, at least once a quarter. And then, you do all these like lunches together, you go for boba runs together, which we did even back at Vicky, right? I mean, that was the thing too. And I felt like just having this one-to-one, like personal, in-person sort of interaction helps with just understanding person, giving alignment. And also we have this thing called like the core weekly team meeting that I set up where we share also with the team data like what's our numbers showing, what's our midterm, long-term priority, so that at least the engineers, designers, they also know what the company is thinking about on a more strategic layer, what the leadership team has been discussing, things like that. So that gives a lot more transparency and communication to Cher's point to the team so that they're not just like only coding or only doing like PRs and stuff like that. They also get to have a taste of context, a taste of why we're doing certain things and what outcomes you're trying to reach. Yeah, so that's just a taste of like I guess what I would do in my role as a PM.
I 100% agree with that. And since Stephanie mentioned about Vicky, right? So I guess that's one context I didn't mention during the introduction just now, which is that I've also specifically invited my guest today because of our connections from a couple of companies ago. Or, well, I would say this is around 3 to 5. No, not 3 to 5. Probably around 3 years ago, lah.
Mm.
The most of us were in this neat little company called Rakuten Wiki, and we worked together for I guess at least 2 to 3 years. And I think on the point on what Stephanie mentioned on the part where you say you set up the team meeting to discuss midterm, long-term priorities and strategy. I mean, I'll be one to say outright that I appreciate that a lot. To be honest, even as a junior employee before, when you have product managers or either product manager or your engineering manager setting out that strategy to let the team know what we are doing, right? It brings in some level of meaning, lah. Uh, that we are building something that is heading somewhere. We're not just going in rounds, doing let's say like UI redesigns, year after year. Yeah, just wanted to add that because I thought that was something that I appreciated a lot as a engineer, lah. Yeah. Sure. How about you? What do you think in terms of alignment? I think from a designer perspective, I think it's quite interesting because you also mentioned a lot of alignment, and I think that's kind of rare from the perspective of a designer.
Interesting that you mentioned that it's rare because I feel like a designer is essentially a facilitator.
I
So
can
in
explain a bit
Wiki,
about that
okay,
if you
sure,
want.
go ahead.
Like,
Go
because the
ahead.
thing is this, and feel free, any of you, like, if you want to disagree with me, which is that in terms of facilitating or in terms of communication between teams, inter-team and intra, like within the team itself, right? Usually, right, I would say is either one of the two, which is a product manager or the engineering manager that does that communication. Designers, I think the most I've worked with, and I'm not trying to throw any shade at them, but I'm just saying that usually the designers work either directly with the engineers or directly with a product manager. Like, let's say setting up the PRD, and then you have PRD, then the design that follows that, and being able to educate the team on how to build certain things. But in terms of cross team communication, uh, and setting like objectives, strategies, things like that, I feel like that's probably more rare for designer to do it. I'm not saying it's wrong, just to be clear. I think it's good to have. It's an additional benefit.
Sure, sure. I think you were in the wrong team, Vicky, because um, so I think maybe Steph has experienced this, but we had a pretty small design team in Vicky. It was like what 4 to 6 people, and the designers back when I was in Vicky, the designers would run a lot of workshops where we would include both PMs, QA data and developers. So a lot of times, obviously I can only speak to the workshops that I've ran, but a lot of times it's about things like maybe it's a kickoff meeting and we are working on this particular feature and then we want everyone's perspective of what could go wrong before we even start designing. Or I've ran things like what was that? It was like a retrospective on what all the teams think are the problems in our delivery system. So we would like hash it out in the workshop, and then we would go back and see if we can change anything on our side. So those are some of the workshops that I've run. In PayPal, I've ran some of that as well. I've ran like a little bit of maybe like product or ideation workshops, and then so that's between like I guess the trifecta. But within design and content, so content is a very big part of PayPal. So the design and content partnership is really, really close. It's even closer than design and PM or design and engineering. So what I would usually do is I would do like kickoff meetings with my content partner first. Then we would do another round of like, I don't know, kickoff meetings with our PMs and developers. That's on the occasion where there is no project manager. So we have very large projects where we have project managers. But if we are in a project that has no project manager, I am in fact the project manager. So I would gather all everybody's like kind of timelines, and I would be like, okay, design and content, this is our timeline. Product team, do what you want. And then the development team would then base their projections on our timeline. And then we would send all of this to, say, the leadership or something like that. Yeah. So I guess it works a bit differently in different company types.
I
Yeah, I
definitely
wonder if
agree with
it's
the last. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if it's also like partially due to how like the design culture is created and maintained. Like I can definitely see the difference between the way design did all the roadmaps, the workshopping and presentation and all that that Shir mentioned. So like other companies that I've worked at, there is that difference. I do see that maybe some other companies that I've worked at don't really have that level of like focus or putting that sort of responsibility or ownership, I don't know what the right word is, on the design team to also be the one facilitating it. Yeah, so I wonder if it's also something in relation to how maybe the design head or whoever is leading design chapter to think more intentionally and purposefully into the role that design will play beyond just like UX UI design. I know that would just well show up, right? For sure. Yeah.
I'm calm now. I've been working on this for like 8 to 10 years. I'm just like zen. This brings a pretty interesting, I guess, question to mind. So we've heard so far that the product team would sometimes facilitate this kind of alignment. The designers will facilitate this kind of alignment. Developers, have you facilitated this kind of alignment?
Actually,
or
yes.
I guess the conversation. Oh yeah, if you have like an engineering project manager, I guess like in PayPal we have that, and then the project manager would come to us as well in the beginning to have that conversation.
So from my experience, and I like to say since we were talking about Rakuten Wiki before, right? In Rakuten Wiki, I would like to use the word I was spoiled as an engineer where I know the product managers in Wiki were the project managers as well. And I thought, oh, this seems like the I guess the standard in the industry. I've seen
It's
similar
perfect.
things. Yeah, it's perfect because as an engineer, I just do engineering stuff. And then I move on to other companies. I became a EM or I became a tech lead in certain teams. And I'm faced with the fact that, A, you need to be a project manager. Like, this is what I'm told. And at first, I couldn't stomach that for a while. But I mean, over time, I realized, yeah, you have to. The main issue why, at the company where I was at was because there wasn't enough product managers. And I think the main thing seems to be this for project manager or project management, it seems to be more towards whoever in the team, this entire product development team, right, has the time to do it, right, has the bandwidth to do it, should go for it. But when we talk about bandwidth, right, then we also go along on things like for example, for product managers, do you want to, at the point of time where there's not enough of them, do you want to take more time and bandwidth from them to do project management where they could do better on the end of doing like what they're supposed to do as product managers. And I think that same thing goes, in my opinion, go for design as well. Because I'll be very upfront. Also, up until today, I actually haven't heard of a designer being a project manager. Although I wouldn't say it's out of the realm of the possibility. I
It's
think it's
not
good that
official. It's not
it's not
official.
official. Hmm.
It's not an official,
Oh,
like,
that's
it's not on
interesting.
my head saying that I am a project manager, but
Uh,
I'm just looking at my projects and I'm like, okay,
mm,
if I don't do this, nothing is going to move. That's why
mm,
I'm doing
yeah.
it. So when I left the last week, like the last 2 weeks um my, I guess, engagement with PayPal, I was having lunch with a PM, a
Mm,
PM lead that I was working with on a major project. So before I left, I was still working on a project that has yet to be
mm,
released, for a really large continent. Um, so he started to complain to me and was like, "Oh, how come your content designer doesn't talk with a PM and doesn't talk with
mm.
the engineering?" And I was like, "Well, what do you think? I've been doing this, like, so you kind of need some sort of project management, even when it's between design and content and research. Someone needs to be like, what is your timeline? Give me your timeline so that I can report all our timelines to the larger audience." Yeah. Yeah, someone needs to
Very
do
much
it.
agree with that. Yeah. You always need that coordinator, lah, that one person. And I find it quite interesting now that we are saying, as we are saying this, right, as an engineer, as a designer, as a product manager, as long as I think the person, I guess I'll throw this out there, lah, in that as long as the person possess that like certain basics or standards of leadership capabilities and being able to drive the entire team to, or between teams, lah, to work on like certain projects together, then anyone can step in. I think anyone can step in to be a project manager, assuming that position isn't filled up. Yeah. But still, I would say it's quite unique. Like in the last 10 years of my career, I haven't heard about a designer being a project manager before. But again, like I mean, hats off to you, right? Mad respect to you. That yeah, I think it's great that you made it work. And of course, I think as you said, when you were departing or when you were looking at handing over, people can see the cracks showing up lah. Because probably it's not the fault of a designer. It's also not the fault of a project manager. But I think the point is probably no one is taking that role now. Was that the problem? Like no one really taking over that project management?
I think people
Mm.
didn't realize that that's considered project management.
Ah,
They're like, oh, it's only timelines. Um, but so if my content designer, let's say we are starting a new project, right? And we need, obviously the larger team needs an estimate. The development team definitely needs an estimate before they can give their own estimate. I would start to ask my content designer, okay, so how long do you think you will need to write this? And if that person can't answer me on time, I will say, okay, I'm predicting that you need 3 weeks for this. I'm going to put this in my in the deadline. So I would do it for this person, and this person would just be like, okay, sure. So that actually happened a lot in PayPal, especially when your projects get larger and larger. Yeah. So I guess our answer to this question, what do you think is key to a good product development team, is project manager.
yeah. Actually, it's quite interesting. We're moving towards that lah. Like, as we said, trust and alignment. But it seems like in the end, the person that executes on that passing the trust around alignment, right, or like passing information around, seems to be that project manager lah.
Yeah, I mean, in PayPal, I
Yeah.
worked with pretty good project managers who I mean, it's so easy for them to kind of rally up everybody and be like, guys, just
Mm,
let me know what your timeline is. And everyone meets,
mm,
like everyone would do what she says. So
mm,
yeah, I think you need this person to kind of push things forward, especially if your project is getting really big and like kind of
mm,
unwieldy.
Yeah, we have a TPM as well at Endowus, and usually
mm.
she's engaged when we have huge cross-domain big
Mm.
projects. And yeah, I don't think I would have survived without her involvement as well. Yeah.
I think same perspective from my end. I think the having a TPM helps a lot in that cross team alignment. I think I like probably I can speak for I think for product managers and even designers as well. I think the given let's say sometimes we really have limited bandwidth. I think it's actually better to have a dedicated person do project management. Then we operate on like, as an EM now, I do more on my people management, my engineering, my tech, like stuff that I need to do on my tech team lah, engineering team. Then you guys probably have your product objectives, design objectives that you have to get towards. Yeah. So, but sometimes, yeah, I guess no choice. We also have to step up if that position isn't really there.
Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, I think we
Maybe-
are all playing roles that are beyond
Yes.
beyond what we are paid for. Let's just say.
Oh, that's a very vastly
Hmm.
interesting topic. That, but I agree on the sense that at least like wearing multiple hats, uh, and I find it quite interesting that for product managers, right, implicitly I think you are assumed that you should be able to do that. As more, I think as a role that's usually more outspoken. But I think for designers and engineers, usually the expectation isn't there until you go. Maybe you are like an engineering manager where you're expected to again be more outspoken, driving the team right in certain things, right? Then yeah, usually you're expected to also stand in for that once in a while. And I think the same I heard maybe also from design too.
Yeah.
Yeah, lor.
Maybe designers are expected to kind of do this kind of project management, because like I had managers who were like, oh, can you give me the timeline on this? Because if my manager needs a timeline, that means their leader needs the timeline from them.
Mm.
So it kind of all flows down, and I personally need to know the timeline then, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
But is your manager the one doing the coordination? Like I'm assuming they need timelines because someone is coordinating something lah. Like it's not just to say when we'll finish at a certain point of time, right? But to coordinate between teams.
I think I feel like this is another conversation. I don't know if we
Uh,
are getting too far from this, but when my managers were asking me for timeline, usually he doesn't. When he's asking me for timeline, it's because there's a PM that's pressuring him to give him timelines, pressuring him for the timelines. And I will be like, why is he asking you? He should be asking me. That's another conversation. I think it does not
Okay,
belong to
yeah.
this. The conversation that we are having. Yeah, but they are obviously pressured in some way. Maybe that project is like part of a major project that we are going to release. Then they definitely need to know the details. Otherwise, it's pretty much hands off.
Okay, I agree. It's probably a different topic lah. More in terms, I'm gonna say it's maybe more on the side of, how should I put it, company hierarchy. Or like my take on this is more like probably the person asking a question doesn't know who he needs to direct the question to. So it makes sense to just go from the top and then let the person on the top like filter out and figure out like who you should direct the question towards lah. Okay, maybe moving to a slightly related but different topic from this, right? I think it's definitely maybe around 15 minutes ago you mentioned about codification. Actually, I kind of want to explore that in terms of a product development team. So product development team, like in a sense that it's quite abstract, right? It's just saying, different people of different functions working together, not just tech, product, and design, right? But actually, we also should include things like your data team as well. But since you mentioned about codification, I kind of want to hear from your perspective, like what that means to your company and how do you actually execute on that and how it helps.
Yeah, sure. So for us, how we divide the squads is really based on like user flow. So like for myself, I look after the onboarding process. So basically from the time the user signs up and has, their investment account basically created and ready to start investing. So that entire flow is a part of the user journey that I look after, which my team looks after. And then so my team would, as a pretty standard squad, we do have like a designer, front-end engineers, both for web and mobile, as well as back-end engineers. But of course, like the core platform piece of it is on its own. So there's a platform team, a separate team from us. So that's sort of the horizontal layer. I think you might be familiar with that sort of concept. I think it worked really well because then once you have a squad, you can have like determine your own set of OKRs that the squad can operate on. And we implemented this last year. And so before last year, we didn't operate on a squad. It was just like, I guess, we just had a big ginormous team that just says customer engagement, and it's just like a very big team. And whatever comes in, we have to figure out how to best prioritize it. But because now the team is all different, we have our own OKRs, and I did think it's been very successful in a sense where engineers themselves, they're more motivated because they have a higher sense of ownership once you have like a determined set of like OKRs. And also like each person, each individual gets really familiar with your own domain area. So like you become like the subject matter expert, right? And you really, really understand all the ins and outs of the system. I think that really helps the team to just progress a lot faster um, whenever we need to now address new features or like iterations or adjustments. I think it makes the team move a lot quicker. I think that helps a lot. So yeah, is there anything else that you want me to expand on? I think that's what I feel. I love the squad model lah, actually.
Okay, I have one question, and you probably heard me ask this 5 years ago. I think pre-pandemic, because we used this codified model somewhat in Wiki before. I guess the Sumpi squad was so Sumpi squad basically for audience who are listening to this, whether online offline, right? Sumpi itself is a Korean news publication system, and then we sort of had that same what do you call it, the vertical that Stephanie mentioned earlier on, right? You had that product manager working there together with the back end, front end, DevOps engineer, sort of like within the same squad lah, except that the back end and DevOps engineer was kind of just one single guy. Wait, what was my question? I blabbered into that. I kind of forgot about my own question. Crap.
The squad model in Wiki.
No, that wasn't my question. I went too deep into that, and I kind of forgot about my own question. Sorry?
You said something about 5 years ago.
Yeah. I said record 5 years ago. Then I started thinking about the Sumpi model, and then I completely forgot about what I was going to ask.
Is your question about whether? Oh, sorry. Is your question about whether or not it worked in Wiki? Or like the concerns or challenges? The concerns or challenges with this kind of model? Is that your question?
It's okay. It's a question here. I can now. I'm trying to recall backwards because I was concentrating too much on explaining Sumpi. I think it's a question that asks. Oh yeah. Okay, I just remember the question. Thanks, Shir, for that save. So I'm curious on the side of in currently like for Stephanie in your current squad, right? I mean, you mentioned it's a vertical. Then of course there's also the horizontal, which is like the, let's say, the entire team. Let's say for backend team, front end team, things like that. But the one thing I've seen about the squad model is that usually you have limited manpower there, in the sense that let's say you only have one front end engineer or one XX engineer from XX domain. How do you deal with timelines? If let's say like someone has to go on urgent leave or has to go on some folks, let's say, go on annual leave and things like that. Wouldn't that be also hard to coordinate because you can't have too many people in the squad as well?
Oh, we have 2 per function.
That's a really that's a really easy answer. But then wouldn't that make that squad too big or too costly as well? Like too many people working on one single function. Like in regular operating circumstances, I feel like that might be a bit too big.
I think because like the domain that we cover is quite big. Sorry, it's not just onboarding. We also look like account management, user management. So it's quite a big piece that our team needs to look after. So I would say for us, minimally, we have to at least have 2. I mean, we only have 2 per so web, we have 2, mobile, we have 1 senior, 1 junior, back end, we have 1 who is also doubling as an EM, so there are still like multiple hats being worn and all. But this is the team that I work with. I think so far it's been okay. There's still too many things that we're trying to do. I don't think there's lack of like things or like difficulties with having such a big team. And I think that's where, like, going back to the first point that we talked about, having those moments and protected time to just run, I don't know, weekly team meetings, priority planning sessions, stuff like that. I think that helps so that every team is also on the same page.
Wait, just to clarify one point, when just now we mentioned about, I think one of the engineers acting as the EMs as well. This is not the EM of the domain team, right? Or is there like separate EMs for domain teams as well as like the squad team itself?
So I use the word domain and squad interchangeably just because when I say domain, it's like the user journey that we're referring to. So it's an EM for that squad.
I see. Sorry, okay, maybe I should also clarify myself. I think for domain I was referring more towards like backend, front end, or like let's say technical related domains like in your company. Would those levels, right, also have their own engineering managers? Or is it just
Yeah,
entire company working on Squadified model?
yeah, the whole company is working on this squad model. Yeah,
Mm,
and for the what you're referring to domain, like maybe the chapters themselves, they have
mm,
senior guys in that chapter. I don't know if they're called like chapter leads or
yep.
the
Chapter leads,
heads of
yeah.
that. Yeah, but for what it's worth in terms of when we, at least from a PM perspective, when you go into planning, prioritizing resources and all that, usually we talk about the EMs who are in charge of each squad. Yeah.
Got it. Thanks for the clarification. By the way, I just realized we have another guest in our stream over here. Sure, would you like to introduce us?
Oh, hi, this is Poppy. So she's here because she's afraid of lion dance.
Oh,
She's been barking a lot, so she needs to be here.
So
I'm
for
just
folks who are
comforting her
listening,
for the moment.
for folks who are listening to this in the future, so as I mentioned at the start, like this is 17th February. So in the place that we're mostly all of us are residing in Singapore, like yeah, the Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year holiday just left. So yeah, there's things like lion dance around. I haven't heard anything in my neighborhood so far.
There's a
Uh,
lot around my neighborhood, unfortunately.
Okay, so with that, I think we have had quite a healthy discussion on this first question. And it seems like while we started off with things like trust, we went into alignment, we even talked about things like the project manager and how that person, right, he or she, right, is really important in driving the alignment across and even explore things like squadification. Now I'd like to jump on my final question, for our session today. And the one thing I want to ask is, what do y'all think should be avoided then for a product development team? Yeah. So in this thing that I'm showing over here, of course, it's taken from this same page where it's showing that of course now there's three different areas and possibly even more domains. They are not overlapping with each other. There's usually like gaps in knowledge and communication, things like that. But beyond stuff that we have mentioned, like alignment and communication, like what do you guys think might be things that we want to avoid in trying to have a successful product development team? And maybe I can start off first, since I wrote down a few points for myself. And I feel like some of this are actually somewhat related to what Stephanie mentioned early on. I think for myself, as a both coming from previously a junior engineer's perspective, as well as now as a engineering manager, right? I think the one thing that I can see very visibly when it's missing, right, that prevents a development team, right, to this entire product development team to work out well is when there's no clear goals being set. I'm not just referring to OKRs, although it does refer to that. I'm talking about things like the lack of that strategy for the entire team. And this is important, right? For two different things. One thing definitely, I think the more obvious thing is for the engineer, like people who maybe they're invested in the product, they want to build. They maybe they've stayed with the company for a number of years, and if they see that the product itself doesn't grow as much, right? Like it doesn't build in that motivation that they are doing something meaningful. Yeah. Then the other problem being that I think the actual one that we might see that impacts most people in real life is the team themselves or the squad. They might end up not having much, those let's say like huge milestones, projects that they're working on that substantiate, why they are there. And this might actually also mean like let's say for the company, they might end up dedicating less resources for the team. This might actually like mean bad news for the team overall. I don't want to go into the deep details on like what like whether layoffs or whatever lah. But essentially, I'm saying more in terms of that if the team doesn't really have that vision, at least okay, not even saying team vision, like, at least some sort of smaller mission, right? I think it becomes a problem for them lah. Yeah, that's my take. What do you guys think?
yeah, OKRs is definitely important. I mean, like as I was saying, like we implemented OKRs last year. Actually, one interesting behavior that I noticed since we did OKR is that I wasn't expecting this, but somehow the engineers on my team, they became so invested in the OKRs. We have a dashboard built to track like how far are we from reaching our desired like number and all that. And it's a weekly, monthly sort of view. And we also have Slack alerts, so we will always send out whenever there are new information, new data, and the engineers themselves will take the initiative. Hey, we hit this number today. Wow, what did we do? Or like must be good sign or whatever it is. Like they themselves would tag us. Like I didn't have time to look at the numbers yet. They themselves were the ones to first comment on it and like, oh, okay, this uh like just chatting about the numbers. So I felt like they're very excited about it, and the fact that they can see whatever features, whatever work that they're doing will have a pretty good material impact on the numbers helps to just feed into that like virtuous positive cycle of just getting them even more excited to work on the next thing. So it helps do my job somewhat. Like I don't need to do much convincing. They are already sort of excited because they do see the impact on the numbers. So I would say like don't underestimate the power of OKRs as long as they're like really properly and meaningfully defined. I mean, of course, that in itself is a separate topic. Yeah, but just wanted to really emphasize and add more to what you shared earlier.
Mm, I would attest to that same opinion. That the excitement is justified. Or let's say justified lah. I think whether you are a engineer or designer or even let's say like a junior product manager, like just joining onto the team, right? I can sense that level of excitement, especially if you let's say you have been hitting your OKRs that you have set for yourself, the goals that you have set over there. Because yeah, it does build into that motivation that the team is doing something meaningful lah. At the very least, that's my own opinion. Yeah, but on that, maybe I want to just dive in a little bit deeper. So you mentioned that your company set up OKRs or set up this entire process of tracking, viewing, and like sort of have the open OKRs with your team to be able to view it together. How did this entire process went about, like getting it started?
Because we were trying to set up the whole squad model. So then it's quite and like how Amplitude has this playbook on OKRs North Star. It was the same exercise that we did actually at Vicky, trying to define our own set of OKRs. So bringing that also into Endowus and ensuring that every team has a meaningful set of OKRs. And then what happened from that is that I mean we did spend like quite a few months just aligning and arguing what is the right set of OKRs. But once that's done, then actually we got the help from the data team to just build all the dashboards for us to monitor and getting the all the squads also aligned that this is the objectives and this is the key results that we are gonna aim towards too. Yeah, I think that whole process just helped to. I mean, we also needed to get alignment from the leadership team so that we get all these metrics acknowledged and recognized by the leadership team, so that there's buy-in. And that way, it made it feel like it's an sort of official, like company wide, like known thing that this is what the product team will be focusing on alongside the engineers. So it puts the product engineering team in one sort of body, working towards the same goals and helps like reduce the tension and all that maybe we might have been familiar with otherwise. Yeah. So I think that helped us a lot. Did I answer your
Just
question? Yeah.
Yes, it did. But I want to just poke a little bit more, and maybe not asking from just an engineer's perspective, but when this OKRs was introduced, right, within your squad, I'd love to understand, was there any pushback from team members? Usually something new that usually will be some pushback. Lah.
Pushback. Pushback. I think from the general team is just really no. I mean, we are all on board with the concept of OKRs, and it's not something new. The challenge is, are we doing it the right way? Are we monitoring the right metrics? Do we even have the right tracking implemented for us to know that, right? So I think that's the most challenging bit, which was why it took quite a few months to even reach to a consensus at the end that my chief product officer would be happy with, and also it's something that the whole company can also easily understand. and align with. So I think it's just more like communication and trying to figure out what exactly is the right OKR before we commit to them. Yeah, the challenge is after the OKRs have been somewhat met, now the issue is, do we want to still keep doing the same OKRs or like have a new completely set of OKRs now? I think that's a different, like it's a new problem that we are in currently.
But it's a good problem to have, especially when you meet your OKRs and now thinking about having whether you have to set new ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about any other areas that you all think that things that a good product development team should avoid? Maybe I'll throw in another word over here because I think in our prior conversations when we met up a few weeks before, right? And I wanted to sort of get some ideas for this podcast. So I think one word that I heard before was silos. And curious about like what you guys think about like in terms of silos, especially for squad. I guess a squad is also somewhat operating a bit like a silo if not done properly. Like, what do you guys think about like as a product development team? Should we avoid being a silo? Would that be a problem? Anyone?
Yeah,
Yeah, Poppy is
silos.
here to answer this. No, go ahead.
Okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
Poppy can go ahead first.
Go ahead. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think squads can also definitely have silos. The tricky part is that every team has their own set of OKRs, right? And we have our own set of priorities. So there are cases where, oh, the team is doing some stuff and then realize that one of the features or one of the projects that we're working on does affect another team's numbers or another team's services as well. Then it's like we need some help to resolve the issue. And if that requires like intervention or just like more overhead coordination and communication with the other team, that it sort of in a way messes the planning that each team has, right? Because now we need to figure out and resolve that overlapping challenge, you know. So I think there's some, I mean, it's also the part is that how do we preempt this? How do we, as much as possible at a very early stage of the planning process, identify this so that other teams are also aware, but this is the ideal case, right? I don't think it's gonna be like that for every single project. Sometimes you only will uncover this issue when you actually dig deeper into the code and all that and realize that, oh, actually this requires something else from other teams. How do we then want to mitigate this?
I think maybe to also go a little bit putting my own opinion on this lah, and I'd love to hear what you guys think. I'm guessing part of what you're referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, is the in technical implementation or how we want to build this to be sort of like sort of far reaching in the future, like thinking about of future proofing, building some features to be future proofing. And my take here is probably for a squad based model, like for Spotify squadification model, probably the chapter lead, that means the engineering or technical lead for that front end chapter or for that a single code base, for example, probably that guy has to be also trying to helping to coordinate across multiple squads to make sure that the at least anything that squad A is building isn't blocking squad B and squad C, so on and so forth lah. Yeah, that's my take, at least from one of the companies I've worked at a few years ago, who was also using a squad model, and how we try to avoid things. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we don't have that practice. Usually it's just the EMs themselves trying to also talk through it. Yeah, I think like the power, I mean not power, I mean the responsibility and accountability often fall on the respective squads. EM when it comes to like technical discussion and trying to figure out solutions to address it. Yeah. So I guess that's where
So,
like company to company it may look different in how we operate. Yeah.
mm, okay, now I'm gonna poke Sure. Sure, anything to add on to that? For silos, like it doesn't need to be silo as a squad lah. Like I think even let's say like for engineers or designers who may end up working too much in a silo.
Oh, I have a lot to add to this. I think for a company like PayPal, where you probably have like 10 or 20,000 people working, that's actually a killer to me. So in my experience, at least with the teams and the verticals that I've worked with, the designers are not in silo, because what we do is, like, for instance, I'm in compliance, right? I know that whatever we release in compliance will probably affect like the merchant team invoicing or the consumer side. So the designers in compliance team, basically I'm the only designer in the compliance team. So I would reach out to other designers in the verticals to be like, hey, we are releasing this. This is my Figma file. These are our flows. How do you think it's going to affect your vertical, or do you have anything else of concern that you can point out to me? So that's what I do. And then I've seen that the engineers would also coordinate between themselves with other teams. And what I've not seen is that, or rather, what I've seen is that the product managers are actually the ones in silos. So because there are so many verticals, there are so many teams. For instance, the compliance side, or rather the peer-to-peer P2P side, P2P means like person-to-person transfer of money, I think. The P2P side doesn't converse with, let's say, the donation side. So then the P2P side would say, oh, we want to do this. And then the designers would come up with something. And then when we present it to the larger audience, which includes the donation side or other verticals, they'd be like, no, you cannot do this. So to me, all of this can be solved if the product team are not in silos. So I had a particular project where me and a content designer, we had to consistently tell the PM running the project that, can you please speak to your fellow product peers? Because if not, it's resulting in a lot of work on the designer side, because you keep changing, like they keep changing ideas. Like it was on a daily basis where the ideas kept changing. Yeah. So yeah, that to me
This
is a killer.
I think this also sounds similar to a bit of what Stephanie mentioned earlier on in terms of preparation, right? I think definitely alignment is also maybe a different phase of preparation where if there is alignment even within, let's say, product managers, like working at a lower level, like you have what's that, align all your views and then moving it to the next level, then essentially the work should be able to be coordinated better that way as well, rather than having a lot of this friction between squads and teams.
Yeah, I think it's on the individual, like either designer or product manager or engineer running that particular project to be doing. Yeah.
One point I'd like to also bring up, maybe this is more of a pet peeve from me, although it's not my pet peeve, it's a pet peeve of product managers who have worked with me. Like one point that we should avoid for a product development team to operate well, like to this question, is being, I guess, upfront about technical depth, or rather, maybe upfront is not the right word, but I guess
Transparent.
being transparent and knowledgeable. Like transparent, again, I think that's the same thing as being upfront, but knowledgeable, I guess that's the part that both the engineers as well as like product managers, designers, like have struggle with, like in the sense that, like, let's say, I have a product, I know there's technical depth, but I don't know how much time I need to spend on like technical depth to make things better. And then I guess at some levels it does frustrate the product manager as well, because okay, product manager, if let's say a product manager is really good, you probably have a list of things that projects that you want to work on, that you already ready to stack rank on, in terms of like getting a story points, in terms of like the business objectives coming out from it. But usually what works out really well for a squad is if you stack rank your product objectives against the engineering objectives as well, which is, I mean, of course, there will be some level of benefit coming out from some of these engineering objectives. Like, I mean, be it in terms of better UX, or maybe the more obvious one is, let's say, cost savings. If, let's say, cost savings gives you $1 million per year in terms of cost savings, then that's easy to compare against, let's say, other product objectives. But I think what I've seen so far is probably that frustration, because sometimes it's also very hard to have that a list of all of those engineering tech debt objectives that the team wants to work on. And that's something I've probably seen from a number of different companies. As a leader now, I'm trying to prevent that. Hopefully that will work out well towards the teams I work with in the future. Any take on that? Like, have you all seen like similar frustrations or experienced it yourself?
But how are you thinking of preventing that?
It's not exactly preventing. Okay, okay. Let me put it like this, lah. I think it's definitely, it won't be that ideal case where you have 100% knowledge of all things that engineers want to work on. But I think for myself, at the very least, what I would like to do as a leader is be accountable to my product and design counterparts on what engineering wants to do. Like I can't just say, hey, I'm going to spend this quarter doing engineering objectives, but I can't justify like what's the benefits of doing that. And that again, as a leader now, right? I mean, because I'm also trying to think of a product sense, it also frustrates me because I can't compare against like the engineering projects I want to do against the product initiatives. And if the product initiatives, let's say it okay, I mean to be very honest, like I'm somewhat of a business driven person. Like if the product objectives drives 100 times the benefit than the engineering objectives, I'll say it's a no brainer. Let's just go for the product one first. Because that would bring in more benefits to the company. Maybe you would think about things like expansion earlier. You get more people to work with, like solving this tech debt anyway. So I'm sorry if I went one whole round, but essentially the main thing I'm looking at is being able to at least do the same thing as product managers, craft out that list of items that as a team, engineering team, what we should work on, and then share that with your product counterpart and figure out stack rank on both sides, right? See which one are the ones you want to work with first. Product can go ahead first, if you have something that's really valuable. But if let's say product doesn't have that yet, then let's say one of the engineering objectives has a much larger benefit, bigger footprint for the team, right? Then we should go for that. But I think the idea is that knowledge needs to come out first. Then engineer need to be able to investigate that and come up with a plan. That's my take. I'm not sure if that's convincing.
Yeah, I mean, usually my own style is that I trust, my EM to give me a good sense and reasonable sense of what amount of technical debt we are facing and like the repercussions if we don't address them, the trade-offs that we'll need to make if we do want to address them, how would that affect our roadmap? Ideally, it's before the roadmap planning that we do like on a quarterly basis, right? So before the next quarter, we should already start having this discussion earlier. If there are certain things that across the board, maybe because the CTO himself wants to say that, okay, we really want to do this migration work, we want to do this cost cutting, cost saving initiative, all teams will need to take part in it. Sure, right? That's our P0 item, like all teams need to address it. That's fine because there's a very clear impact. But on a team to team level, then I would actually trust and put the owners on the EM to have that list ready to discuss before the next quarter so that we can actually integrate them if needed into the roadmap plan. And then obviously with the use case, the business case that you mentioned, right, we need to build a solid case why we should address it now versus later. Or if we can't think of why we need to address now, is there a certain like threshold that, okay, once it passes this threshold, we need to seriously think about addressing this. Yeah.
100% agree with that. Okay, usually I say 100% agree because there's nothing else to add to that. But yes, I think that's what, as an EM myself now, I think that's what I want to aim for as well. Just to pull out some words you mentioned for like things like roadmap planning, right? Yes, I think the EM definitely needs to be aware of the when this like rituals happen and make sure that this work is done, investigative work is done before that, so that this comparison can be better done in that planning, right? At least internally, your first level of planning between you and your product manager first before the next few levels, whether it's with like higher leadership or maybe whether within like some sort of internal tech org lah in your company. Yeah. But I think that's really crucial to be, again, that word prepared lah, to be prepared for that. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have covered quite a number of answers for this topic itself. I think, yeah, the topics itself today, I think I've received quite a lot of insights from you guys. But before ending off today, I do have a few questions from our audience. And I think this is actually more towards squadification. So I'm going to bring it up and we definitely need the help. I mean, of course, from all of us, not just from Stephanie, who was mentioning regarding squadification earlier on. So this person actually was a guest for my last few episodes. So hi, Harizwan again. Uh, okay, let me bring up the question. So this is a question from Horizon. He's watching from YouTube. So his question, Horizon here, is saying, has there been situations where resources in the squad were moved to other squads to prioritize other projects? And how do you deal with the sudden loss of people on said project? Oh, I have an answer for this as well, but let Stephanie answer this first.
Yeah, of course there have been situations. Um, yeah, and there was a lot of I mean, it first started with conversations with myself, and my boss, and I mean the CPO himself, and also the other team that needs a resource. And we would try to first understand like the reason why and what ROI the project, that other project is hoping to achieve, right? And um, so usually it's, I would say TLDR is that we just need to iron out like, okay, what the impact is. If I take out this resource, how long are we gonna not have this resource? We had one case where we willingly gave someone to another team because they really needed someone for backend, and then turns out they really like him, and now he's their EM. So we completely lost that person. And yeah, so I mean, of course, for us, our team, I know to this day we still joke about it, like, we sacrifice 1% to you guys to do your projects and all that. I mean, in good spirits for sure. But if we know, I mean, once we know that it is really for something that's critical for the company, because whether it's a very major release that is a bit more timeline sensitive, because I know one particular project was very important for a client that had huge amounts of like monies with us. So we cannot afford to like jeopardize that client, for example. So then it is what it is, right? If we know that it's for the company's benefit to make this decision, then so be it. We just want to caution that obviously it should be minimized, right? It's not like every quarter now we start seeing a outflow of our resources. It should be like contained as much as possible to like a one-off thing. Yeah, so that's how we deal with it. And of course, we need to communicate that to the rest of my team members, right? So they know and understand why we had to take out this particular person to be moved to another team altogether for that other urgent priority. So the team knows the reason, and that helps them also understand and be willing to, yeah, okay, this is what it is. I will make peace with it lah, because it's what's best for the company. Yeah.
Okay,
I
I
have the
realize.
other side.
Oh, go for
I
it.
have the. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, go for it, go for it.
I wanted to say that I have the other side of perspective because I was working in compliance. Nothing happens without compliance, right? In a financial institute. So people actually get moved to compliance because we need to comply faster. We are like, oh, if you don't release this within the next 2 months, um, PayPal is not existing in this particular country anymore, for instance. So we actually have additional folks added to our team. Yeah, if we needed that. So yeah, that's the only perspective I can give. Like, yay, we complete our work faster.
Okay, I can't add on much because I think Stephanie gave a really good answer. But I
Yeah.
do want to say, yeah, I think plus one to the perspective on, I think as long as it benefits the company, I think my personal mantra, like business must win, um drives me here, like in the sense that I think whatever you do should be in the benefit of the company. Of course, not saying that on the like the employee suffering because of that. Like it must be for good reason. And I think if the company and the employee stands to gain a lot from it, I think definitely we should drive that. Then the team that's being affected, of course, maybe find some middle ground for them. Like, do we want to hire a person to backfill this person that was moved over? I think yeah, that's something that things like this should be considered lah. But then the honors of this then falls on the leaders of these teams to figure it out, rather than just thinking about, okay, let's just move one guy and then not think about repercussions coming after that. I think it comes twofold, which is firstly the folks that wants to drive that business or product objectives, then also the people who think about like the people, like the people managers, who the leadership who thinks about like what people would look at in terms of this issue. You now you have one less person, the team is doing less, like people would be affected, people's perspectives will be skewed because of this. So you also have to think about how to help resolve that lah, on the emotional front of things at the very least, I think. Okay, Harrison has a second question, so I'll bring that second question up. So the final question from our audience in this. Is a squad a permanent fixture in your company or something? Oh, okay. I guess this any one of us can reply. But again, I'll give the honor to Stephanie. Yeah.
Mm. I think the hope is that it is a permanent fixture to the extent that it can be, unless something radically changes, like something like a greenfield project comes up, right? A new business line, then probably if that means that another team needs to really be focused on looking at that, spearheading that, then maybe that's a decision that we have to make. Yeah, and that's something that actually right now my team might be maybe at at that stage. So yeah, the hope is as permanent as possible because you've already given so much time for the team members to like grow in their expertise in a particular area, and they've gotten into a good state and all that. So and also when I say even if you want to move to another team, it's not like the whole team will be dismantled. Actually, the hope is that you still retain the team. It's just that maybe the objective would be a bit different, the mission would be a bit different, but you want to still retain the team members together as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe to add on to that, yeah, I think my suggestion would be for folks who are curious about the squadification model. I think you can search on it. This is driven by Spotify from the start. Although, if I'm not wrong, I think Spotify stopped using it, but a lot of other companies have continued on that same model lah. And I think yeah, in terms of squadification, that squad itself is not permanent-ish, but I think for a whole part, as long as the company's objectives, the vision that distills down to each of the individual OKRs and squad vision as well doesn't change too much. I think yeah, you shouldn't see your squad being dismantled or changing too much. I mean, at most you'll see like staffing movements, like because people leave companies, new people join, things like that. But yeah, huge movements. It's not. I wouldn't say it's whether it's encouraged or discouraged, but it's not a feature lah of the squadification model. Yeah. Yeah, okay, with that, that's the final question. Sure, and Stephanie, thanks so much for bringing in your perspectives on this very interesting topic. Yeah, I mean, we've spoke over the last 1 hour on this. Any parting thoughts that you would like to give the audience in terms of building I guess a kick-ass team, for example. Like, I'm sure you guys would have worked with really great teams before.
Sure, do you have any thoughts?
Ah,
Feel like I've threw the curveball here.
my personal philosophy is always something that comes from improv, which is called yes and. So this is the baseline of improv, which is when someone comes to you with something maybe unfamiliar with you, first you yes and to accept this person's context or reality of the situation, and then you bring in your thoughts. So to me, it's I think collaboration is the most important thing to create a KS team, and yes ending most of the time would get you very good collaboration. Yeah, that's also my personal philosophy. I don't know if it works, but I think it works for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to top that already. I just think for me, I think at the end of the day, as long as we are genuinely sincere about what we want to do, I mean, as a person, you want to genuinely just want to get things done, working, moving, and you communicate this out to your fellow peers, your colleagues, your whoever you work with, your stakeholders, and all that. I think that helps a lot. Like people know that you want to do things right by the company, you want to do things right by the end user, and as long as people hopefully see a sense, a glimmer of that sincerity, then I think that is great already by my standards. Like that's at least a starting point that I can just continue to build like relationships on and stuff like that. Yeah. Getting too philosophical maybe.
How about your take?
I'll add a little bit here, like, and because this is something that happened to me more recently in the last few months, I'll say like, don't estimate the rah-rah people in your team. Like in terms of maybe this is more towards driving teamwork. which is that given that today a lot of us are working remotely, and I mean, not exactly sometimes in office, but even saying across countries as well. And I think it's quite important at some levels to have like a few people, or maybe even just a single person, right, in a team that always tries to pull the team together, even just conversing about day-to-day topics. I think can be quite bland and dry if every day you just come for a stand up and everyone just talk about the work, and then you start working by yourself, and then most of the time all the rituals is just very, like, even though it's supposed to be team, it's very individualistic. You don't know anything about your teammates. I think that there can't be much of a personal relations, as well as like being able to drive better teamwork, because you only have that basic sense of a team, like, which is just trying to build a product together. So I think maybe this is more relevant in this like post COVID pandemic period, like at least something that I've seen more in real life, where we are no longer working in the same physical office already. uh and because I say it's relevant because I kind of nowadays, as the EM, I have to keep doing the same things. You guys know I'm an introvert, so I don't know how I have to keep getting people to talk about random stuff. I think yesterday or the day before, during a stand up, I somehow made a topic about people's haircuts or something like that. Yeah, life
Mm.
just works like that. Okay, but anyway, thanks for the great insights, Stephanie, Sher, for today. Really appreciate. I think it has been over 1 hour, but I think we have gotten a lot of great insights in how we can build that good team, as well as a product development team together. Thanks for joining in. See you guys.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
See you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so to before we end off today's session, just want to talk a little bit about our next podcast. It's going to be themed over here as the design angle. Again, we're touching on simply go again, but this time round not from the engineering angle, but more from from designer's perspective. So actually, I'm going to be bringing in two designers from a company I worked from before, Harbor, who are going to be chatting with me on this and giving me that take in terms of how perhaps we could have done this better, or maybe in hindsight, how the design system for this entire migration should be done better. And with that, we have reached the end of our podcast today. Thanks for joining us this entire 1 hour journey. Do subscribe to our socials. I think it'll be in the description of the podcast, as well as you can see in the video right here. If you like our stuff, definitely do go to our LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, like, share, subscribe, all those good stuff. And yep, without further ado, thanks for joining, and I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.